नमस्कार, गुड इवनिंग। सानिध्य लंदन के संवाद 23 में आप सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत है। आज के इस विशेष कार्यक्रम में हमारे सम्मानीय अतिथि हैं भारत के जनरल GD बख्शी, जो भारतीय सेना के सम्मानित अधिकारी ही नहीं, एक समसामयिक लेखक और इतिहासकार भी हैं। आज वे अपनी चर्चित पुस्तक सरस्वती सभ्यता पर विस्तृत बातचीत करेंगे। As we have guests from all other nationalities as well who may not understand Hindi, so I will switch to English mostly. Just a few words of introduction. General GD Bakshi comes from a family, a military family, and his elder brother, Captain SR Bakshi, was killed in action in the 1965 war. He is a combat veteran of many skirmishes of the line of control and counter-terrorist operations in Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab. He commanded his battalion in active operations in Kargil and was awarded the Vishisht Seva Medal. Later, he commanded a brigade in counter-terrorist operations in the very rugged mountains of Kishtwar and was awarded the Sena Medal for his distinguished services. He subsequently commanded reputed Romeo Force during intensive counter-terrorist operations in the Rajouri-Punch District. He has served 2 tenures at the highly prestigious Directorate General of Military Operations. He has taught at the Indian Military Academy, IMA, Dehradun, and the prestigious Defense Services Staff College at Wellington. He holds a master's degree in defense science and an MPhil in strategic studies from the University of Madras. He completed his PhD from the same university on limited wars in South Asia. General Bakshi is a prolific writer on matters both military and non-military. He has published 37 books and over 300 papers in many prestigious research journals. One of his latest books is on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Today, he will enlighten us on his seminal work, Sarasvati Civilisation, a paradigm shift in ancient Indian history. The book is based on pure scientific research, indicating truly a landmark shift in the history of the country. The river Saraswati has played an important role in the origin and development of Indian civilization. The book has adopted an interdisciplinary approach in understanding India's ancient past. Last but not the least, we all know that General Bakshi, is a very popular television commentator and primetime television, and is indeed very well known for being upfront and forthright. General Bakshi, it is indeed a privilege for me to welcome you on behalf of all of us. I know this session is dedicated to your book, Saraswati Civilisation, but I can't resist my temptation to ask you at least one question. What has been the impact of your military training and background on your personality? Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Joshi ji and Alaknanda ji, for getting me to the Sannidhya this evening's discussion on my book, on my work on the Saraswati Civilization, as you mentioned, a paradigm shift in ancient Indian history. You know, where we are going depends a lot on where we came from, right? So when you talk of ancient Indian history, we talk of our origins. We talk of our origins. We talk of our identity per se, who we are, and how we came to where we are today, right? So you have to go back to your origins. You have to define your origins. You have to understand the basis of your identity as a nation state, as a civilizational state. One of the most ancient civilization continuing civilization in the whole world. Older, sir, than the Chinese, if I may say so, tongue in cheek. Now, the point at issue is that when you talk of ancient Indian history, you generally get back to Max Muller and his chronology and his dating of the dating of the Vedas, and then you get to the Aryan invasion theory, right? And then we get into a whole lot of controversial ground, because it now comes to light that a whole lot of the colonial historiography was designed to justify British colonial rule in India. You know, let me just explain. Let me dilate a little bit on this. You know, the British were outsiders. They were an external power who were not indigenous to the subcontinent, and they had come to rule over here. They had to justify their foreign rule. And they came up with the theory of the Aryan invasion theory, which seemed to suggest, look, we are outsiders, but then so are you. The bulk of the people of India, you have come from Central Asia. You have come from Central Asia, and you are as much foreigners as we are. As we are. So that was the basis of the colonial justification for their imperial spell in India. Now, my point is that a lot of the leftist historians today, so-called leftist liberal historians, led by that doyen of our historiography, more or less, Romela Thapar, Irfan Habib, and others, have come up with a particular view of history, which I thought, very sadly, is a bit jaundiced and is a bit subjective. How is it that 75 years after independence, we have not been able to revisit our ancient Indian history? You know, we have not been able to update that history. We have not been able to step outside the confines of the colonial paradigm of history as enunciated by Max Muller and the rest. The simple fact that I'm trying to make is that Max Muller did not have at his disposal, satellite imagery, radiocarbon isotope dating, many of the recent archaeological excavations, nor did he consult the geologists, nor did he consult the paleo channel experts, the hydrography experts who deal with the rivers and their changing courses, nor was he, able to tap into what is now called DNA population mapping. So a whole lot of very diverse tools and disciplines have now come into play, and it would be, these are empirical data. This is empirical factual inputs. You can't, not take a look back at your history without cranking in these fresh inputs that you now have, and which were, I'm sorry, not available to Max Muller and the other colonial historians. The other little factor that I would like to point out in all humility is that American history is not written in Harvard, is not written in Oxford. French history, Russian history, Chinese history is not written in Oxford or Harvard. So I don't understand why the last word on our history has to come from foreign institutions. I think we are now fit enough, we are now educated enough, enlightened enough to take a look at ourselves and our past and our identity, and resolve the issues of identity ourselves in the light of a whole lot of data that is available in multiple fields. And that is why I am a strong, I'm a very strong advocate of a multidisciplinary approach to our history. So without much ado and with your permission, Joshi ji, I'll now commence a structured presentations because as the Americans say, don't tell us, show us. So I'm going to show you a whole lot of images and pictures. I'll not just talk theoretical moonshine. I
Thank
will
you.
focus on hard facts. So I hope that answers the query that you had.
Thank you, sir.
That's
Thank you.
that's my interest. Like I said, my PhD is mostly in strategic studies, but my primary area of concern is military history, and then that starts with our very beginning. So, as that song from The Sound of Music began, let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. So, let me now begin with the structured presentation. Like I said, I will be talking to you about the Saraswati civilization and the paradigm shift that it has created in ancient Indian history. The discovery of a lost river, the discovery of a lost civilization. Beta, you know, the simple fact of the matter is that when Alexander came and invaded India, by that time, the Saraswati River had completely dried out and vanished from sight, right? So, when he came to India, the river that the Greeks encountered was the Indus. And from Indus, they came to the word Indica. And from Indica, we have the word India. The very origin of our country was named after the wrong river. The Greeks got it wrong very simply because by the time 325 BC, when they came, the Saraswati River had vanished, right? Had simply vanished from sight because of tectonic plate shifts and a whole lot of other factors that I will explain later. When the Arabs came in the 7th century and thereafter, they also saw the Sindhu or the Indus River, because they could not pronounce the S. So they called it the Hindu, the Hapta, Sapta Sindhu, the Hapta Hindu. And from Hindu, we had Hindustan, and that is how India has been named. I'm sorry, we got our cradle river wrong, and that is what I will try and highlight in the course of my presentation. Now, did this civilizational area of Harappa correspond fully to the sacred geography of the Rig Veda? And therefore, the question that I am raising, and a lot of scholars, historical scholars in India are raising, we have the Indus civilization, the Harappan civilization, and we have the Rig Vedic civilization, right? So, the question that I'm going to ask and I'm going to answer them, try and answer them today, is was the Rig Vedic civilization and the Harappan civilization one and the same? The colonial historians have told us that, the Indus Valley civilization was a Dravidian civilization. The Aryans came from outside with their war chariots, wooden war chariots. How these crossed the Hindu Kush and the Himalayas, don't ask me. I've served there plenty, and I know even modern day tanks cannot cross those mountains unless there are roads constructed, proper paved roads, right? So how they came across these mountains with their chariots, etc. Horses, I can grant you, but chariots. And because the Dravidians, poor Dravidians of the Indus Valley civilization, well, they did not have horses, they did not have chariots, they were routed. Sir Mortimer Wheeler proposed the theory of what is called the great genocide. Indra, the war god of the Aryans, destroyed 100 fort cities. There are verses in the Rig Vedas which call him the destroyer of 100 fort cities of Shambhara, the Asura, right? So they said the Dasyus, the Dasas were the Dravidians. But it's not as simple as alliteration, you see. You just can't twist it out of context and say it is the Dravidians. Because they created a whole lot of fault lines to divide the Indians. And one of the primary fault lines was the so-called Dravidian theory, Aryan Dravidian theory. So the Aryans came from outside. They massacred the people of the Indus Valley civilization. So the simple question we are now asking is, if there was such a large-scale massacre, show us the evidence. Where are the corpses? Where are the dead bodies? Where are the skeletons? Right? So ultimately, they found 46 skeletons in one place. Right? So this is the evidence of the slaughter that was done by the Aryans when they came and invaded India in 1500 BC. Firstly, how did you arrive at this date, 1500 BC? It's very curious, you see. Max Muller was very God-honest, God-fearing Christian. And as per the biblical paradigm, the world had started about 6,000 years. So quite obviously, nothing could be before 6,000. And nothing could predate the Mesopotamian civilization. I mean, that was a given in the historiography of that ancient era. Today, it looks a bit childish. And that's why we are saying, I'm sorry, you have to base history on more empirical facts rather than these back of the envelope calculations and wild surmises without objective factual basis. So the theory that is now being put forth is, and I will try and prove that to you, that you see both the Indus Valley civilization, 2 million square kilometers of area, starting from the borders of Afghanistan, Baluchistan, down to Sindh, down to the whole of the North Indian plain, the northwest quadrant of the plains, right down to UP and Maharashtra and Gujarat. 2 million square kilometers of an area, civilizational area. And there was total standardization of weights and measure, brick sizes, the construction of the houses, design of the houses, the bullock carts, everything was so standardized, right? So was this civilization and the Rig Vedic civilization, the sacred geography of the Rig Veda is exactly the same. The Sapta Sindhava, the land of the 7 rivers, right? So were these two the same? That's my question that we are going to address. Was this therefore the original Aryan homeland? If the Aryans belonged to the Saraswati, was this the original Aryan homeland and not Central Asia? Today, there is another theory to counter the Aryan invasion theory. There is an OO, out of India theory, OOI. Okay? That means the Aryan did not come from outside. They went from outwards towards Central Asia, Middle East, Europe, and what have you. So we will debate and discuss these two things. And they're talking of a proto-Indo-European language. If you study the Sanskrit language, you study Latin, you study Greek, you study the Slavic languages, you study a whole lot of East European languages, English, there is a whole lot that is in common. And they all seem to have come from one proto-language. So which was this language? Scholars are suggesting today that this was Sanskrit. So what was the strategic direction of the Indo-Aryan migration? Was it into India from Central Asia, or was it outwards from the Saraswati river outward? Now the colonial historian said, and not without logic, look, if you study the pattern of Indian history, all invasions have come from Central Asia into India. There have been no examples of Indians invading from, the Indian plains and attacking Central Asia. There is an example of Chandragupta Maurya having conquered Afghanistan and Baluchistan, right? But by and large, the direction of invasions has all been from the dry, cold, arid plains of Central Asia to the lush, fertile plains, alluvial plains of India, which was so rich. So they came for loot, they came for murder, rape, etc., and they carried back most of your gold. So if this is the pattern of history, how are you talking of out of India migration? This theory holds true only as long as, there is no eco-catastrophe in this region. The Saraswati, ladies and gentlemen, was a river that was 4,600 kilometers long. It flew from the Himalayas to the sea. It was 6 to 8 kilometers wide. And at Patiala, where it was joined, the Yamuna joined it and the Satluj joined it and brought it ice melt water. South of Patiala, it was 20 kilometers wide. It was lush and green. Rhinos were found here. Tigers were found here. Just like you get them in the Brahmaputra Valley today. It was as big a river as the Brahmaputra and possibly grander. And this was supposed to be the most sacred river of the Indian civilization. The Ganga came much later. If you study the Vedas, they put far more emphasis on the Saraswati than they put on the Ganga. So my point at issue is, if such a mighty river dries out altogether, and why did it dry out? Of course, I'll be covering that later. But just in passing, there were two major tectonic plate shifts in India. Because of one, the Yamuna went and joined the Ganga. Half the ice melt water was deprived to the Saraswati. Then the Satluj went and joined the Indus with the second earthquake, right? And because of that, it lost its ice melt water, became a monsoonal stream. Around the time of the Mahabharata, there was a 12-year drought, which is called the Meghalayan period of world climatological history, right? And that is the time a number of major civilizations, to include the Egyptian and the Mesopotamian, they all died out, along with the so-called Indus-Saraswati Valley civilization, right? So the point is, if there is an ecological catastrophe, if the Ganga dries out today, will people come from outside to settle on the banks of a dead river? Or will those people on the banks of the Ganga move out? Have you understood the point that I'm making? It's very basically logical point that if the Ganga dries out, the people will migrate outwards, right? Outside people won't come to die in a river that is desiccated, that is dried out and gone dead. I shall cover this aspect more in detail a little later. Carbon dating puts the antiquity of the Indus-Saraswati civilization to beyond 9,500 years before present. 1,500 BC, right? That is what Max Muller said. Now we have radioisotope carbon dating, which puts some of these cities, the lower diggings in the Birhana complex, and I've been there, Rakhigiri, and I've been there. It is 9,500 years, sir, empirically dated, right? So you got a whole lot of things wrong in the colonial era because you did not have the facts. Now the fact of the matter is, the cradle of the Indian civilization, therefore, and if you see 9,500 years, it is the cradle also of the global civilization, right? Given its age, antiquity, and the amazing degree of persistence and sheer cultural continuity. So the question that is being asked today is, are the Aryans indigenous or alien to India? Were they Indians by birth and origin, or did they come from outside, as the colonial historian said? Are the Indus, Saraswati, and the Rig Vedic civilization one and the same? Does this account for the amazing degree of cultural continuity of present-day Hinduism? We've missed an entire body of evidence in plain sight because of a deeply entrenched mindset that these two civilizations, the Harappan and the Rig Vedic, were separated by almost 2,000 years in time, which now turns out to be incorrect. So today, India needs to reclaim its own history. right? Like I said, can you imagine French, Russian or Chinese history being subcontracted to American universities? This happened to us because of 2 centuries of colonial rule. We had our history written for us by our foreign rulers. Today, we need to reclaim our history and reinterpret it in the light of new facts and knowledge that have emerged in multiple fields of inquiry. We need an integrated, convergent, multidisciplinary approach to solving some of the riddles of Indology. The colonial and Marxist historians have strenuously been denying the historicity of the Saraswati River. The basic battleground is the leftist Marxist historians say there was no Saraswati River, sir. It was a myth. It was a story, a fairy tale. My foot. Because today, the first Landsat American satellite in the 1970s sent back pictures of the dried out bed of a massive river from the Himalayas to Gujarat, the sea. Then our own, Indian remote sensing satellite C, sent up by ISRO, has sent back piles and piles of satellite imagery, remote sensing imagery, which clearly shows the dried out bed of a river, and I will show you that imagery. We have visual proof of the existence of a river. But Romila Thapar said, oh, there was no Saraswati. There was a Heraksavati in Afghanistan. But the Heraksavati, sir, was a little mud stream. It did not rise in the Himalayas and it did not go to the sea. The Vedas describe the Saraswati as rising in the Himalayas and flowing to the sea. Now, like I told you, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Kindly take a deep look at the map which is being projected in front of you. To the north side, you will see the Indus River and the Satluj River. And parallel to it, you will see the Saraswati, the Ghaggar Saraswati River. Now, you will see a whole lot of purple dots. These purple dots are the settlements, the villages, towns, cities of this civilization. Now, you just need to take one look to see that the Indus is only an outpost. How thin are those dots there? The densest cluster is in the area of Delhi, present day Delhi, Haryana, Kurukshetra, the top cluster. The second cluster, just below the Ghaggar River, where the G is written, is now Fort Sandaman, Hakra area in Pakistan, right? And then you have some clusters towards Gujarat. The so-called Mohenjo-daro, what you found on the Indus, 60 to 80% of the settlements of the Harappan civilization have been found not on the Indus River, but on the Saraswati River. Take a look. One look at this slide will tell you which was the cradle river of the Indian civilization. So what we have done is, in the year 2019 at Delhi University, we had held a multidisciplinary seminar. In the first session, we discussed colonial historiography and we took a look at Aryan invasion theory, which was subsequently modified to Indian Aryan migration theory, even in the British time, because there was no evidence for an invasion theory. In the second session, we did satellite imagery. We got the ISRO experts, the scientists, to come and talk to us on the Landsat and ISRO satellite imagery, which showed the course of the Saraswati. And then we had the geologists. Then we had the hydrodynamics experts and those who study paleo channels. Paleo channel means how the rivers change their channels. How the Yamuna used to join the Saraswati, then it went and joined the Ganga, right? How the Satluj used to join the Saraswati, then it went and joined the Indus. Then we covered the recent archaeological evidence, the diggings that have been done post-independence by experts like Dr. B.B. Lal, Dr. Vishisht, and a whole lot of doyens of Indian archaeology who've done some tremendous work. That work has to be taken into account. You can't get stuck, your record stuck on Max Muller of the 18th century. I mean, that's ridiculous. Then we talked of gene mapping and population genome studies. And lastly, we had a session on linguistic evidence and scriptural evidence. Now, if you study the Rig Veda, there is a shloka called the Nadi Sukta. It lists the 7 sacred rivers which were called the Sapt Sindhava, that India was the land of the 7 sacred rivers. Starting from the east, these started with the Ganga, the Yamuna, Saraswati, Satluj, Ravi, Bias, Sindhu, etc. Right? This was the sacred geography of the Rig Veda. Now, like I said, this is the same area and was occupied by the Harappan civilization. So, which leads to the next logical question, then were these two the same civilizations? Right? The Rig Veda emphasizes not the Ganga, which is now the holiest Indian river, but the mythical stream of the Saraswati as the backbone, the cradle river of the Indian civilization. You know, in the times of the Rig Vedic, it was considered the greatest river of India. It was called Sindhu Mata, the mother of the Indus. Nadittama, Devittama, Anuttama. Naditama means the greatest of all the rivers. Devittama means the greatest of all the Devis. It is supposed to be the Devi of knowledge, wisdom, intuition. Anuttama, the greatest of all the mothers. So, you know, when you read the verses of the Rig Veda, they describe this river as glorious, loudly roaring, mother of floods. The river that the Rig Veda is talking of is a mighty river. You know, don't destroy us, O Saraswati. They're so scared of its power and floods, right? And there is a verse in the Rig Veda which says, the Saraswati uproots the tops of the mountains like an elephant uproots the lotus flowers from the ponds. Can you get a more graphic image of the powerful river? But by 1500 BC, in fact by 1900 BC, this river had dried out altogether for the causes that I will just be outlining. So when Max Muller said the Aryans came to India, there was no Saraswati. How then did the Rig Vedic seers write in such great details of the Saraswati? It's very simple to say they were idiots. You know, their evidence is absolutely not to be given any credence. It's utter nonsense. There's a whole lot which is very, very factual. Now let me get to the proof of what I am saying. Here is a satellite photograph, ladies and gentlemen, which shows you the northwest Indian plains. And there at the bottom, you see that line. That is the dried out course of the Saraswati river. Proof positive. Don't tell us. Show us. So I'm showing you the absolute satellite imagery. Like I said, it was as per satellite imagery, it was 4,600 kilometers long, 6 to 8 kilometers wide from Himalayas to the sea. Patiala, it was joined by the Yamuna and the Satluj. It got the ice melt water. There were major tectonic plate shifts that occurred which forced this river to change course. Right? The Yamuna joined the Ganga and the Satluj changed direction and joined the Indus. So they lost all the ice melt water from the Himalayas. So it became a monsoonal stream. And they now said the origin is in Adibadri, right? Around the time of the Mahabharata, there is a 12-year drought recorded in the Mahabharata. Okay? And this river dries out completely. South of Jaisalmer, it goes underground. And north of Jaisalmer, it breaks into a series of isolated lakes and pools. The river vanishes. By 1900 BC, it is fully dried out. So how could then Max Muller say that the Rigvedic Aryans came to India in 1500 BC and they composed the Vedas here? How could they then know about the Saraswati? That river was dry, dead and gone. How is it mentioned in the Vedas? So you have a logical, absolute absurdity. Now here is another satellite map. Look at this map carefully. The river in deep blue, that is navy blue, is the Satluj Indus. It is to the north. The sky blue river below is the so-called Ghaggar Saraswati Alignment. And you see that it is starting from the Mansarovar Lake in Kailash, all the way to the sea, flows through, Himachal, flows through Haryana, Punjab, Rajasthan, goes into Pakistan, comes back and goes to Gujarat, joins the river, joins the sea at the Rann of Kutch. Right? Take a good look at this mighty river, the cradle river of the Indian civilization, the mother stream of your civilizational space. Now, if you take another satellite photograph, here you will see, if you see the south of it, the Hakra Paleo Channel is marked. Banavali, that is one of the settlements of the so-called Harappan civilization on the banks of the Saraswati. Kalibangan, Major, Rakhi-Giri. These are all major settlements. Rakhi-Giri is the biggest town of the Harappan civilization. Right? And where are they? These are not on the Indus. These are on the Saraswati. So what happened to the Saraswati? Mystery. What happened to the Saraswati? Geologists tell us that in 4700 before present, a massive earthquake shook North India. So there was a shear fault in the Shivaliks, and I'll show you the photograph of that shear fault which made the Yamuna change course. 2600 BC before present, the second tectonic plate shift, Satluj shifts course and joins this. And like I said, it lost the ice melt water, became a monsoonal stream, 12 years of drought. South of Jaisalmer, there is a place called Vinashana, which is mentioned in the Mahabharata. Vinash means destruction. Vinashana. So from there, the river goes underground. And even today, the Indian Army has dug tube wells and brought out thousands of liters of sweet water from the desert. And if all that water is taken out, you can make that desert green, and there are plans to do so. There are plans to do so. Akbar's cavalry knew of this dried out course. And when they had to do north-south movements at great speed, they would thunder down this dried out riverbed. And they would have to dig just a few feet to get water for the horses and men, sweet water. So that was the Saraswati. Now, if you see the next photograph, you know that blackish line to the north is the Shivaliks, right? And there you see a cut in the Shivaliks. The Yamuna used to first, flow northwards. This is the present alignment of the Yamuna, where it is joining the Ganga, right? Because of this sheer cut, the Yamuna changed course, right? And you can see the Saraswati on the eastern side of this satellite photograph. Here is a sketch. You will see three channels of the Yamuna. These are called Y1, Y2, and Y3. You see the Yamuna joining the Saraswati first. That is the Y1 channel. Then it shifts more towards the uh, east. And then finally it becomes the Y3 channel from Y2 to Y3, which now joins the Ganga. This is how it goes underground south of Jaisalmer. For hundreds of miles, this river has gone underground. And that has saved the water from evaporation. You understand? Had it been on the surface, it would have by now totally been desiccated, dried out. But this is underground, and the plans are to sink hundreds and thousands of tube wells, get the sweet water up, and green the desert. And like I said, let me repeat, 60 to 80% of the Indus Valley sites have been found not along the course of the Indus, but along the course of the Saraswati River. And if you consider the major clusters, then 80% are along the Saraswati and only about 20% are along the Indus. So the Indus is not the real cradle of the Indian civilization. The Arabs, the Greeks, the British have all got it wrong. Saraswati was the real cradle of our civilization. And once again, I show you that slide. See the dense cluster of purple dots which show the settlements along the Saraswati. See the thin cluster of dots along the Indus. That is a frontier area. That is not the core area. The core area is the Saraswati, and that is why the leftist historian Romila Thapar et al., they deny the existence of the Saraswati. But I'm afraid, madam, your word cannot counter the visual evidence of satellite imagery and remote sensing imagery which we now have. This is another photograph in which they have on a satellite map, they have juxtaposed these in white dots now, the settlements. And you can see this Indus has very few. They are along the dried out course of the Saraswati, which is not shown on this particular map. Now let's get on to the archaeological evidence. What does archaeology tell us? Now I've told you what geology tells you, what paleo channel studies tell you, what hydrodynamics tell you. Now let's talk of archaeology. And like I said, Professor B.B. Lal, yeoman service. He is now turning 100. So he is one of the most respected archaeologists of India. And Dr. Vishisht, two great doyens of Indian archaeology. The problem is the script of the Indus Saraswati civilization has not been deciphered. But we have found a whole lot of terracotta dolls which the children used to play with. Bullock carts and female dolls and things like that. And seals with pictures. Now this pictographic language is a proto-language of sorts. And it tells you so much about that era. Right? So much about that era. And now let me again not tell you, let me show you. Take a look at this picture. The ladies especially. Ladies, these are pictures of ladies in the Harappan era, the so-called Indus Saraswati civilization. See the image on your right of the screen. Do you notice the sindoor in the mang of that lady on your right? And if you look closely, the red color has faded, but you can see the bindi in the center of the forehead. The lady which I can see on the screen is still putting a bindi and she has the sindoor. Most Indian ladies put the vermilion dot here and have the sindoor in the center parting of their hair, the vermilion. This is a tradition that continues. When you look at some of the ladies in this program and you compare it with the statue, you see the continuity of tradition. Our ladies still put the bindi, they still put the sindoor. So this is an Indian civilization. It didn't come from Central Asia. Take a look at these bangles. You know, there is a bronze statue, 8-inch bronze statue of the Harappan civilization. You see the bangles going up to the top of our arms. And please see the gypsy women in Gujarat. They still have, you know, the bangles right up to the tops of their arms. This is the most interesting photograph that I have got to show you today. What is the key distinguishing features of the Indic civilization? You know, it is yoga and it is dhyana, meditation. Dhimahi, dhiyo yo na, prachodayat swaha. What is dhi? Dhi is meditation. So the distinguishing features of the Indian civilization are dhyana and yoga. In the Indus Valley civilization, we have found terracotta figurines in the postures of yoga. Please see, please take a look. And if you can't make out, we've got some sketches of these. Kindly see this. You can see the Siddhasan, the Vajrasan. Number 3 is the Vajrasan, Pavan Muktasan, etc. Anjali Mudra. You can see them all. Yoga was practiced in the Indus Valley civilization. Here is another statue from the Harappan civilization, from Harappa itself. Now this man has got his eyes half closed. So what is he doing? Well, you could say he is sleeping or dozing. I'm sorry, he is meditating, right? And you got doubts? Look at this. Look at this. This is a seal of Pashupathi Nath in the posture of meditation, Siddhasan, surrounded by animals, the lord of the animals, Pashupathi Nath. This is a seal from Mohenjo-daro, 5,000 years and more. Take a look at this. Now you'll be wondering, what is this? This is a burial of a man, his skeleton. And he, you know, the great sages, they die in the Siddhasan or the Padmasan. This man has died in the Padmasan. And his body has been preserved like that, sitting in the Padmasan Mudra. See these bones? See these bones? These have very recently been 2,700 years old, of a yogi in the Indus Valley civilization, sitting in the cross-legged posture. We have found in the Indus Valley civilization Shiva Lingas and Yonis. Shiva Lingas are still worshipped. Any one of you who come to the National Museum in New Delhi will find the Shiva Lingas recovered from the Indus Valley civilization. You have any doubt that it was Hindu? You know, you can invent any kind of ridiculous theories, but these are facts. These are facts in plain sight. Even a half-wit can make out the similarity of this civilization with the modern-day Hindu civilization. Look at the seal on your right-hand side of the screen. You know the leaves, which leaves are those? People leaves. We still worship the people. The people tree, people, jisko bolte hain. And you can see the people leaf, the sacred people leaves. Take a look at this picture. If you study this is the toy bullock cart with which the children used to play in the so-called Indus Valley civilization. If you study the proportions, they are exactly like the bullock carts that run in the villages of India today. Exactly same proportions. Look at this boat. The boat on your left is the boat that you see in modern day Gujarat, the fishermen using these boats. And take a look at your right, the seals have a similar boat, drawings of a similar boat. Even the boats are similar. What is this? Any guesses? Let me ask the audience. Any guesses? You know,
Hey, can I answer that?
That's right. You see,
Medicine jars.
It is party. I have used this in my village school.
Yes,
that's right. That's
yes,
right.
I too.
ये फट्टी से आप लिखा करते थे.
जी,
You
हम
know,
last
and this is about 3,000 years old, by the way. 3,000 years old, by the way. Take a look at these, some of the pottery recovered from Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, Rakigiri. Look at the exquisite beauty of this. This is called red slipware. And the design is exactly what you have today. You may have it in steel or aluminium, mostly now. You don't get it so much in terracotta or, porcelain. But you see the design. What a sophisticated civilization. Now I will show you one of the most interesting, pictures of this whole presentation. Those mushrooms, the red mushrooms, and I'll show you, I'll take you one ahead. You see this? You see this red mushroom? Now, sorry. You saw that lady with the same mushrooms around her head. This mushroom is supposed to be the Soma mushroom, as per the German botanist R. Gordon Wasson. That is the Soma mushroom, right? And they were found around the heads of these terracotta dolls in the Indus Valley civilization. That means they are talking of Soma. You are saying it is a Dravidian civilization, has got nothing to do with the Aryans, nothing to do with the Rig Veda. I'm sorry, it is talking of Soma. This is the biggest clue. This is an aerial photograph of Mohenjo-daro. And how much like a chessboard it looks. This is the drainage system in Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. I'm afraid it is better than what we have in Mumbai or Delhi today. Every time there are rain, your roads become flooded. But they had an excellent drainage system going in that area. This is a toy chariot with bullock carts. Now, the biggest argument against this being an Aryan or a Vedic civilization was, where are the horses? Isme to sahab bulls. Isme to bulls. There are no horses here. Therefore, this is a Dravidian civilization. The Aryan civilization, I mean, they glorified the horse. Ashwamedha. Right? Take a look at this. There were no chariots in the Indus Valley civilization. Is it? This is the Manjul, Dr. Manjul, the Bhagpat excavation 2 years back. This chariot has been recovered. This war chariot, Sangramika, like the one that was used in the Mahabharata. You understand? The Sangramika, Sangram, war chariot. This has been recovered. So all this nonsense that the chariots came from Central Asia, across the Himalayas, across the Hindu Kush, I mean, give us a break. Go by the facts. Go by the facts, sir. These are the facts. So we will not have he was a Gora, therefore he was right. Now we come to modern methods of dating. We have radioisotope carbon dating. The IIT at Kharagpur, they carbon dated 2 sites at Bhirana, right? One of the settlements on the Saraswati. And they found that the upper layers were 8,000 years before present, and the deeper layers were 9,500 years old. So, you must have heard the Indian civilization is 5,000 years old. Think again. Look at the scientific evidence. This is not from some shakha or somebody, Swamiji said so, therefore it is so. This is scientific evidence. Scientific empirical evidence. They've also done carbon fluoride dating. They've also done sonoluminescence dating, and they have come to the same figures. So at the very least, the age of this civilization pushes almost 9,500 to 10,000 years from today. Empirical scientific dating, sir. This is Birana, from where the dating has been done. You can see the plinth of some of the old houses which are now gone. You can see some of the drainage system. So, as per the Aryan invasion theory, the Aryans came when? 1500 BC. That means about 3500 years ago. That is how old they felt the Indian civilization was, the colonial historians. I'm sorry, sir, you got your facts badly wrong. Carbon dating proves that thing to be 9,500 years old, right? And the Saraswati River was in its prime about 5 to 6,000 years ago from today, and therefore there is a whole lot of doubt cast on the veracity of the Aryan invasion theory. Now, may I give you some more facts? In Sir Mortimer Wheeler's time, he was the head of the Archaeological Survey of India in the British period. He came out with this theory of the Aryan invasion theory. The Aryan war god Indra came and destroyed 100 fort cities of the Indus Valley civilization, slaughtered the poor Dravidians, drove them south, this thing, that thing, etc. All nonsense. Show us the corpses, show us the dead body. So at one place they said, oh, we've got 46. But they were not at the same level. Are you understanding what I'm saying? When you dig down at various levels, you may get 46 corpses. But that means they are of different ages. And when we checked those corpses, those skeletons, we found no marks of swords, no marks of the spears, arrows, cut marks. Then it was found they have drowned, they have died of drowning. So much for the Aryan invasion theory. Okay. So much for the Aryan invasion theory. So my point is, what happens when a vast river which supports a civilization dries out, gets desiccated, desertification takes place. Rajasthan was once a forest with rhinos and tigers. Today it is a desert. So do people come to die in deserts? You have a river which is dying. Will people come from outside to settle? We want to die on the Saraswati because it is dying. Please see the logical absurdity of the colonial argument. The logical absurdity. So the fact is, it is not from invasion from outside India, Central Asia to India, but in the Saraswati period, people on the West Bank migrated outwards to Afghanistan, Iran, Middle East, Central Asia, Europe. You know, the Danavas, the mother of the Danavas was Danu. The Iranians call all their rivers Danu. What are the names of the rivers in Europe, please? Don, Danube, Donets, Dniester, Dnieper. You see the connection? They've gone from here outwards. They did not come from Europe to civilize us. They came, they are our descendants. That is what a whole lot of data is now piling up. Vedic gods appear in the treaties signed between the Hittites and the Mitannis of Syria and Turkey. They mention Indra, Mitra, Varuna, Nasatya. So the entire Aryan invasion theory now needs a second look. And I'm telling you that in the colonial era itself, because when they could find no evidence, they had changed it to Indo-Aryan migration theory. They said, oh, they did not come and invade, you see. They came in wave after wave of migration. They came without their wives and children. But they changed the whole race of India. How? Why? Why did all the Indian women chose to marry these people unless they had won it by war? There was no war. So there are a whole lot of logical absurdities which are now coming to the fore. Ladies and gentlemen, I have much more, but I will stop the presentation here with this last slide. On the left, you see the Anjali Mudra. This is called the Anjali Mudra, Namaskar Mudra. That is from Mohenjo-daro. This dancer is of your and my era. Most characteristic thing of the Indian civilization, which has spread to Tibet, Mongolia, China, Japan, Koreas, Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Bali, Sumatra, Java, Ceylon, Burma, is this Indian gesture. What I am trying to point out to you is the sheer enormous degree of continuity between the ancient Indian civilization of the Saraswati and the Indian civilization today. You are not only the oldest civilization in the world, you are the oldest living civilization. The civilization of Egypt is dead and gone. Nothing resembles the people of the Nile today. They are Muslims. People of Iraq, dead and gone. So I'd like to end up with a quotation from Muhammad Iqbal. कुछ है हम में कि मिट सकती नहीं कभी हस्ती हमारी, सदियों रहा है दुश्मन दौरे जमा हमारा, सारे जहां से अच्छा हिंदुस्तान हमारा. Jai Bharat, Jai Hind, and I'll be happy to take on any questions now, Mr. Joshi, with pleasure. Thank you.
That was so fascinating. Thank you so much. Let us give you a big hand, General Bakshi. Thank you very much. What a fascinating talk and answers. I think this has been Sannidhya's, I would say, as an understatement, one of the best we have produced today. And now I would like to go to my chair of the Sannidhya, Shivkant Sharma, who can ask a very good question. And I will leave the floor to him to sum up. Thank you and thank all. So it is all yours, Shivkantji.
Not one of the very best, I think the best presentation we had so far. General Bakshi, before concluding, I have my own small query. You started explaining about Ashwa. Do we find any evidence of horse in Saraswati Valley sites anywhere?
Like I said, the problem with India is the tropical climate. Remains do not last. Remains do not last. But in Saurashtra, we have found remains of the horse, identified as the horse. The second point is, even in later India, India has not been blessed by a very good gene pool of horses. We used to buy our horses from Arabia. The Pandavas of the south, I'm forgetting their exact nomenclature. It will just come back to me. They bought their horses from Arabia. They had to spend a lot of money because horsed cavalry was what caused us severe problems. And the Arabs and the Central Asians had better horsed cavalry. They had invested in the explosive paradigm. So the horse is not native to India. Matlab, the Indian horses are not very good. Shivaji had crossed the local chota breed with the Arab breeds. Bhimthadi horses they were called. We've not been blessed with a good gene pool of horses. And one reason why we went down in the Middle Ages is India did not have good war horses. So we had to import them. We had to import them from outside.
Why don't we find them in toys or seals or anywhere else?
No, that's precisely what I'm saying. We said you haven't looked enough. And that comes to the question that was asked. Are we doing enough in terms of archaeology and digging? No. You dig more and you will find. Seek and you shall find.
Thank you. I think Major General has given us so much to ponder. I don't think I have much to add. The only name that springs to mind after listening to this fascinating presentation is of Major General Alexander Cunningham, who basically was the first director of Archaeological Survey of India.
That's right.
And who stumbled upon Sarnath, and then Sanchi, Nalanda, Takshila, and Central Asia. And before him, Mahatma Buddha and Buddhism used to be a quasi sort of mythical concept. Historians used to believe and disbelieve whether Buddha existed, where was he born, whether he was one of the pantheons or not. So after his excavations and his extensive work, the Buddhism, the entire history became clearer. So probably you have done similar or more important work through your book to sort of shed light and put the history in its proper perspective. Ancient history was becoming almost a sort of stigma. As you said yourself, before Akbar, we stopped talking about history, we stopped thinking about history, fearing that we would be labeled as saffrons and non-seculars. So I think it's a time again to go back to our roots. Without explaining or without exploring our roots, we fail to understand ourselves. We fail to grow. And out of your evidence is that two verses from Rig Veda, they come to mind. You refer to them again and again. One was from Nadi Sukt. That is, Rig Veda is divided in 10 chapters, and chapters are subdivided into hymns. So it's a 10th chapter, 75th hymn and 5th verse in Jagati Meter. And listen to the words carefully. It's the first time and the only time Ganga and Yamuna are mentioned in Rig Veda. Yes. Imam me Gange Yamune Saraswati Shututri Stomam Sachata Parushnya Asiknya Marudvridhe Vitastaya Jikiye Shrunujya Sushomaya. So basically here, the names of 10 rivers, 7 major rivers, and 3 minor rivers. The entire hymn is on rivers. So later on, they also, there is a mention of Kabul River, there is a mention of 2-3 more rivers. So, and basically the entire hymn here and the hymns from 6th book of Rig Veda, Saraswati is mentioned more. There is more emphasis on Saraswati than any other river. Sindhu is mentioned time and again because of its size and its flow and everything. Eventually, most of the tributaries used to go to Sindhu, but Saraswati was very important civilizationally, as you said. And if I quote one from the 6th chapter of Rig Veda, and we use it in puja as well. Panchanadyaha Saraswati Mapyanti Sasrotasaha Saraswati tu Panchadhaso Deshe Bhavat Sarit. So 5 streams gush towards Saraswati, and Saraswati takes them all and then irrigates the entire land and goes to the sea. So basically, Saraswati was the bedrock. We were called Hindus because Indus was the outer periphery, and people coming from the West and from the Central Asia first encountered Indus. So they saw the first huge river is Indus because apart from Indus, there is no big river in that area at all. So that's why they thought anything that lies beyond Indus should be called Indus. So we became India and Hindus. Actually, if they had come a bit further. And if Saraswati was still thriving, then we would have been something else. So obviously that's up to us to decide what we are, whether we want to be known by Indus anymore, want to be known by Saraswati. It's for us to explore. We were talking about horses in Dholavira. I mean, I was wondering, in Dholavira, there is a template, um, there is a sort of signboard which was excavated. And I think in the world, this is the first sort of traffic signal. That board has uh, markers of different lanes. Like bullock cart would go by this lane, and people who want to walk go by this lane, and some other sort of vehicle would go by this lane. So, but there are no horses there as well. I was trying to look around. So probably we need to explore more why our literature has horses so much in Rig Veda, but we don't have the evidence. Once we find it, then as you were saying, the evidence would pile up and probably we'll win the argument. But anyway, thank you very much for this fascinating lecture. We are really grateful for your time and for your intellect. We would like to have more of your times in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.